controversy has exploded in the province of Quebec over the announcement by the government of Quebec that they will be ending historically low frozen tuition rates for in-province students, which have for many years been sitting at $2,168 per year. They will be increasing that tuition by $325 per year over the next 5 years, and the final amount will total $3,793 per year for a full-time student from Quebec. Of course, the student movement is up in arms over this decision. They are up in arms over what they see as a draconian increase and as an attack on the accessibility of post-secondary education, especially for low-income students and low-income families in Canada. And as per the usual from the student movement, their demands are unreasonable, their demands are uneconomic, and most importantly, these changes are necessary in order to ensure the long-term viability and prosperity of the Quebec university system. So first of all, it should be noted that this is only a moderate increase in tuition. The student movement, its various component parts, has been arguing that the 75% increase that this change represents is draconian. But you have to understand that 75% increase in the context of Quebec's current tuition rate. The fact is that the final product will remain amongst the lowest tuition rate of all the provinces, and considerably below the national average, which in 2010 stood at $5,138. This moderate increase is necessary to deal with a problem that's been in the Quebec university system for many years. That's inherent to the design of the system, which is chronic underfunding. In its report to the National Assembly, McGill University estimated that there is a $500 million financing gap between Quebec universities and the Canadian average. While in the past the government has attempted to the government of Quebec has attempted to deal with issues of chronic underfunding by increasing operating grants, as obviously they did not want to increase the tuition rate, they kept it frozen. They wanted to deal with underfunding by means of increasing operating grants. That's no longer government policy. So Quebec has essentially created a bit of a monster in terms of university financing. They are unwilling to increase operating grants, but at the same time they're unwilling to increase tuition. So for many years the result was very simple in terms of statistics. We had the lowest per student funding of any university system in Canada. On average, 9.2% of the revenue of Quebec universities comes from tuition. If we're going to deal with this chronic underfunding issue, it's clear that that number has to be higher. Now, as I noted before, the student movement's primary arguments against these changes have been that the increases are draconian, but more importantly, from a moral perspective, they believe that increasing tuition will harm equality of opportunity. They believe that lower tuition means higher rates of accessibility for low-income students who otherwise could not afford to go to university. And the fact is, sociological data simply does not reflect that. It's not a fact, it's simply not true. In fact, in 2004, a study by the Montreal Economic Institute showed that despite Quebec's historically low tuition fees, the province had amongst the lowest rates of university enrollment in the country. It's especially pertinent when we compare that fact to a province like Nova Scotia, who has one of the highest enrollment rates in the country, while at the same time having one of the highest tuition rates. Now, that's in terms of a static number. Let's look at a tuition increase, the sort of thing that the Quebec government is proposing. Ontario experienced a tuition increase from 1994 to 2004. The in-province tuition rate increased by a total of 137%. Now, over the course of that tuition increase, there were no changes in its enrollment rate. Absolutely no changes. In fact, Ontario to this day still has the third highest rate of enrollment in the country. Now, this doesn't necessarily show that high tuition leads to high rates of accessibility. What it does show, however, is that the opposite argument is not necessarily true, that low tuition necessarily leads to higher rates of accessibility. MEI cited a number of sociological factors in their 2004 study, which contribute to the broader picture on why low-income families simply aren't sending their kids to post-secondary education. Amongst those sociological factors, MEI cited high school grades, parents' educational levels, parents' expectations concerning their child's education, and savings set aside for their studies by both the students themselves and their parents. The MEI report was compounded by surveys conducted by Statistics Canada, which showed that only 26% of Canadian students cited financial concerns as a reason why they were not advancing to a post-secondary degree. And even amongst that broad category of financial concerns, tuition was only one part of that larger picture. Financial concerns also included housing costs, and they also included costs of living, which are also significant factors for low-income families. So to conclude, the fact of the matter is Quebec's created a system whereby the majority of society, mainly low-income and middle-income families, are subsidizing through their tax dollars high-income and upper-middle-income families. Those upper-income families are the ones that are actually sending their kids to post-secondary institutions. The fact is, a university education is one of the primary indicators of higher earnings over the course of a person's lifetime. Getting a university degree is a very, very profitable thing. And we have to accept that those who actually access post-secondary education come from a socioeconomic background that can afford these tuition increases, A, and B, should be taking on a greater deal of the cost of this education system, which so clearly benefits them and not necessarily those who avoid post-secondary education whatsoever.